Let's cast our minds back to the faraway time of May 2025. See, at the time, a years-long effort by two Hollywood studios, Sony Pictures and Warner Brothers, finally became a real thing. Democratic lawmakers had, for the second time in 2 years, proposed a more than billion-dollar tax giveaway, pledging a decade and a half's worth of tax credits in exchange for the creation of new studio spaces and, one suspects, a little movie magic. But then, as so much Hollywood accounting tends to be, it was all thin air. Or was it? That's right. This week on the show, we ask the question, are Nevada lawmakers brave enough to give $1 billion to Hollywood while the federal government has stopped paying out SNAP benefits to millions of people? From Battleborn Progress, this is Battleborn Bites. My name is Jacob. Let's go get some transferable tax credits. So before we get into the what's happening now and are we really going to have a special legislative session for this of it all, it's probably useful to lay some groundwork. Just to start, Nevada already gives out a maximum of about $10 million in film tax credits every year. It's essentially a tax incentive to movie productions that say, hey, you film here, you get a tax write-off, some amount of taxes to help balance out the cost of the movie. Can't actually use those tax credits because you don't have a tax liability in Nevada? Well, no problemo, you could just sell them for cash money. That is, by the way transferable tax credits works. You ever hear those words, transferable tax credits? It's that. The fun wrinkle, though, is that was initially supposed to be larger in 2013 anyways, to the tune of about $20 million. But lawmakers at around the same time were trying to lure Elon Musk and Tesla to northern Nevada for a giant battery factory, so the best we got, and this is not a joke, was a starring role in Paul Blart Mall Cop 2.
How much for a root beer? Because I'm currently very invested in Mr. Wynn's casino.
That premise changed in 2023, when one lawmaker tried, and failed, to get a hearing on an initial pass at the $1 billion film tax credit, this time tying it to building actual studio space on the west-ish side of Las Vegas in Summerlin. However, at the end of the 2023 legislative session, there was famously a huge disaster, with the governor forcing a special session immediately after the regular session after he vetoed a key budget bill to basically no gain, and then immediately called another special session for a separate tax giveaway for the soon-to-be Las Vegas Athletics, then at the time still the Oakland Athletics, though I guess actively in the process of fleeing the city of Oakland. Thus, film tax credits were dead, but not forgotten. Because in 2025, a different set of Democratic lawmakers resurrect the proposal, this time with the backing of Sony and Warner Brothers. As an aside, the original proposal from 2023 also came back this year, but alas, it had basically negative support, so cast it from your mind. In short, the main plan was to bump the main tax credit line to $25 million, then add somewhere between $80 and $95 million on top for a studio project backed by Sony and Warner. This would all sunset after about 15 years, somewhere between $1.4 and $1.6 billion in transferable tax credits, depending on the version and what date you were looking at it. Once again, those are tax credits that you can just sell if you have no purpose for, so money in the bank, just a comical bag of money for the studio. This, of course, all blew up spectacularly in the final hours of the legislative session, mostly because an esoteric dispute over interim legislative committees triggered a rare filibuster in the Senate that pulled out every parliamentary trick in the book. But that's really a conversation for another day, so check out our video on that if you want to know more. But here's a question. Why even do this anyways? Well, it's because tax credits are Pandora's box. And in this case, Pandora is the state of Louisiana. See, before 1992, there is no such thing as a film tax credit in the United States. By 2002, Louisiana had not only created the idea, but expanded it so widely that locals, eager to get a slice of the Hollywood pie, started calling the state Hollywood South. Thus, the tax credit spread like wildfire. By 2009, 44 states had some version of film tax credits. Nevada, as mentioned earlier, passed their own version in 2013. That's the $10 million tax credit. But no state shells out quite like Georgia, which gives studios a tax credit equal to 20% of a studio's expenses. In Georgia, that bumps up to 30% if you slap a Georgia Peach logo at the end credits. On top of that, unlike other states, the total amounts in Georgia were uncapped, meaning the state had spent an ungodly amount of money on tax credits. Ungodly, I hear you say? Well, in 2024, film and TV production in Georgia totaled about $2.6 billion, mostly off the back of massive Trilith Studios outside of Atlanta. But in that same time period, the state shelled out more than $1.3 billion in tax credits. The problem, among many, As every state or country that gives out the tax credits eventually learns, there's only so much money you can give away before someone offers to give away even more money. And of course, we have to stick with Georgia here, because it is particularly instructive. See, for a decade plus, we had all passively absorbed the Georgia peach while waiting for MCU after-credits scenes.
Patience.
Over that time, Disney received something like $1 billion in transferable tax credits, most of which were sold for profit. But starting this year, Marvel had packed up and left, announcing that not only would next year's Spider-Man movie film from the streets of Scotland, but so would future Marvel movies too. It's not just Marvel, though. After filming Superman just outside Atlanta, DC Studios has moved production of Supergirl and Clayface to the UK. In all, Georgia has seen film and TV spending drop by half in 3 years, dropping from 412 productions to about 245.
Go away! There ain't no monorail and there never was.
What gives? It turns out the cost of doing business is too expensive, and when that's the case, no amount of tax credits can trump the cost of labor, where workers in the UK are not only paid less than their American counterparts, but they don't have the healthcare costs American employees come with too. Something socialized medicine. Looking wistfully at the NHS, problems and all. And now we're here, because somehow Nevada legislators are once again considering putting film tax credits on the agenda.
Well, did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
So, I hear you ask, these film tax credits haven't gone anywhere twice in the last 2 tries. Why is it coming back now? Unfortunately for all of us, the answer is both extremely convoluted and entirely specific to this time and place. Please strap in for the duration of this explanation. So after the last legislative session ended like a deflating bouncy castle, both the governor and legislators were not tremendously happy leaving legislation and stuff they could campaign on during the 2026 election on the table. Not to be forgotten are the movie studios, which as a basic principle love getting states to shell out free money and don't want to leave $1.4 billion on the table. So 2 things happen at once. Republican Governor Joe Lombardo sees a window to call a special session in mid-November to revive a crime bill that he wanted to pass but died at the buzzer because of the whole filibuster thing. Some leading Democratic lawmakers and the 2 studios, Sony and Warner, see this window and say, well, if you want the crime bill, we want this. But now Democrats have a new ally. Organized labor. See, this time a coalition of 20 construction and building trade unions, eager for the construction jobs that would come with building this whole new studio space in Las Vegas, pledged $1 million toward what they're calling a full court press to get the Hollywood tax bill over the finish line. This gets extra complicated by the actual business of Hollywood. See, Warner Brothers has been trying for some time now to actually sell off parts and pieces of its business, largely off the back of a merger they did a little bit ago with Discovery that loaded the company with debt. Now, the Ellison family, both friendly to the Trump White House and fresh off the acquisition of Paramount, the owner of CBS News, has been trying desperately to buy up Warner Brothers, but so far to no avail. But that hasn't stopped Ellison's allies, who have reportedly told Warner that they're the only buyers who would pass muster with the Trump administration's regulators. This ignores, of course, regulators in other countries who would see this acquisition and be like, oh, we don't know if we love that. It's also just wildly corrupt and literally how Viktor Orban corroded Hungarian democracy, but this is a tangent for another day. I cannot do another tangent. Look, as of filming this, we are still waiting to see if Lombardo actually includes the film tax bill in the special session agenda, though certainly a lot of smoke can sometimes indicate fire. By law, only the governor can call a special session, and the governor is the one who sets that session's agenda. That said, any governor who can do math only calls this session if they have the votes to get done what they want to get done. Generally speaking, the longer special sessions go, the more unpredictable and potentially disastrous for whoever these sessions could become. But current events wait for no one. And it turns out that any special session in the month of November may be the worst timed corporate handout in the history of corporate handouts. As you may have noticed, the government shut down. While I am reading this to your eyeballs, the Trump administration has continued to drag its feet to use emergency funding for SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or what we used to call food stamps. Right now, it means millions of Americans will get drastically less food money for the month of November. And it's happening because the Trump White House has, for the first time during any government shutdown, decided to use the hunger of our neighbors as a negotiating tactic. So what are the optics of Governor Joe Lombardo, who shares a party with Trump for anyone who forgot, calling a special session to give Hollywood studios a giant handout in the middle of potentially the worst hunger crisis this country has seen since, well, let's call it the 70s? I'm going to say, not great. And look, this doesn't even get into any of the other stuff that like movie studios, once they start getting these giant handouts, will start raking like entire countries over the coals. Just like look at the way that New Zealand was forced to get rid of certain labor protections because New Line/Warner Brothers threatened to pull production of The Hobbit from New Zealand to Australia, who was doing other kinds of stuff. It pits everyone against each other, and then no one wins. The only people who wins are the corporate shareholders of the studios. And then everyone loses their job because like everyone lost their jobs in Georgia because now they're all in the UK. Because it's cheaper to go to the UK. It's a disaster. But that does it for today's episode. If you like the show, be sure to like and subscribe so you're the first to know when we upload a new episode. Until then, for Battleborn Progress, this has been Battleborn Bites. We'll see you next week.